Esteemed guests, the program is about to begin. At the end of the event, please remain in your seats until our guest speakers have left the room. Then, exit through the rear of the rotunda. Thank you. Please welcome the Dean of the School of International and Public Affairs, Merit E. Jano, and the President of the Republic of Kosovo, Dr. Vjosa Osmani Sandriu.
Well, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Merit Jano, Dean of the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University, and it's my enormous pleasure to welcome you to today's World Leaders Forum. Thank you for being with us here in person. It is really exciting to be able to gather in person, as well as so many students and friends with us virtually. Thank you all for joining us. Columbia University is truly honored to welcome to the World Leaders Forum today Her Excellency Vjosa Osmani, President of the Republic of Kosovo. Thank you very much, Madam President, for being with us today. President Osmani was elected really in a historic fashion in just this past April to lead the Republic of Kosovo, securing the highest number of votes of any presidential candidate in the nation's history. And as president, she has put forward an agenda that's focusing on a series of reforms that, in her words, will tackle the daily acute problems of Kosovo citizens. This includes reforms to health care and education, reducing unemployment, fighting corruption, and strengthening the rule of law and justice, among other crucial issues. At the same time, the President has looked outward to the region and globally emphasizing the importance of normalizing relations with Serbia through ongoing dialogue, and is working with the international community to accept refugees from Afghanistan. Prior to assuming the presidency, she spent many years as a member of parliament. Indeed, she was elected 4 times to that body and served as the first female Speaker of the Parliament, and she chaired the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Committee on European Integration, and was Deputy Chair of the Committee on Constitutional Reform, an extraordinary range of experiences. She's been active in politics and government for most of her professional life, serving as Chief of Staff to the former President, Senior Advisor on Legal Affairs and International Relations. In that role, she represented former President Seju in the commission that drafted the Constitution of the Republic of Kosovo and represented Kosovo in its case for independence. She's a lawyer by training, earning her law degree from the University of Pristina, as well as a master's and PhD program degrees from the University of Pittsburgh. So we are truly honored to hear her today and to hear her thoughts and her experiences and thoughts of the future at the World Leaders Forum. And her remarks are entitled, "A New Chapter in Kosovo's Foreign Policy, Strengthening Statehood and Relations with the United States." I'm very happy when I hear countries are interested in strengthening relations with the United States. We look forward to the discussion to follow, which will be moderated by Professor Alexander Cooley, a great expert on the region and director of the Harriman Institute at Columbia University, which is celebrating its 75th anniversary. Please join me in welcoming the President with us today.
Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. Such a great delight to be among you today, and hello from everyone joining online. I've been asked to speak from my seat, although I'm used to speaking at lecterns quite a lot, but I do hope that we're going to be able to have a great discussion about my country, about the future of my country, and the already outstanding relations that we have with the United States. But perhaps let me start by saying how we all truly feel an absolute delight to be here together with my team, given that Columbia is not just one of the most prestigious education institutions in the United States, but in the world, and so many brilliant minds went through this university, including brilliant minds coming from Kosovo. So I do want to thank all of you for the contribution you're giving for education, not just in the United States, but elsewhere in the world as well. Of course, perhaps to start off by saying that alongside the challenges that being a head of state brings with the job, it also brings quite a lot of privilege to be able to represent your people, in the case of Kosovo, a people that went through so much sacrifice, so much hardships, in order to enjoy the freedom and the independence that we have today. So it is the privilege of a lifetime to represent and to serve your people. And in the case of Kosovo, that is, of course, even quite an enormous responsibility given the challenges that we face both internally, domestically, as well as internationally. In my country, democracy and the freedoms that we enjoy, the human rights that we enjoy today, are deeply cherished precisely because of the fact that for too many years, for too many decades, they were denied. And because I am in an educational institution today, let me perhaps start with that. I grew up in a country under the regime of Milosevic, who denied our basic right to education. So I was in 2nd grade when we were kicked out of our schools. Practically the basic human right to schooling was denied just because we belonged to a different ethnic group, although we comprised over 95% of the population at that time, and we still do. Our parents were all kicked out of their jobs. We lived in an apartheid-like system where discrimination and segregation was also pushed forward through legislation, not just political means. So practically, we were forced to build our own parallel system of education, which then served as our main means of survival. We survived as a country and as a people precisely because of the perseverance we showed in the area of education, and later on, of course, which went on with quite a lot of resistance to protect the freedom and to achieve the independence that we have today. As a former university professor myself, and as a person that has the luck to also spend quite a lot of time on campus here at US universities, I can't help it but say with everyone that I meet how much the right to education should be cherished and how important it is, not just for the survival of a society, but also for its success as a democracy. I strongly believe that it's the biggest and the most important foundation of any successful democracy around the world, and it has been such for my country as well. So, of course, coming from a country where all of these basic rights were denied, and later on we went through a horrendous war where we were victims of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, you can't help it but accept the fact that we have all been shaped as human beings to begin with, but also as politicians, by what we had to go through. The memories of the war, the memories of the apartheid-like system, and the genocide committed against my people are still very fresh. So I represent a people that still has very deep wounds within the society. We've lost tens of thousands of innocent people over just a few months during the war. We have the highest number of children killed during the war by the Milosevic regime per capita compared to any of the other wars in former Yugoslavia. Over 20,000 women in Kosovo were raped as a tool of war by the Serbian regime, and there is still not a single case of justice. We have about 2,000 people that are still missing from the war, that are still in massive graves in Serbia. So I'm mentioning all this to understand the context, because sometimes we meet a lot of people who think that the world started back in 2015, and they entirely forget the context through which Kosovo was born as an independent and a sovereign nation. And these are extremely important facts and circumstances for everyone to understand in order to truly understand how much the freedom that we enjoy today means to us and how much that has shaped us as politicians as well, and also understand why we will never give up on our country's right to exist. For that reason, the challenges that we face nowadays are not just domestic. Obviously, the pandemic has made things quite more difficult, like for any other nation around the world. But we won the latest elections with a historic outcome, not just presence and participation, but also support of the people of Kosovo, on a platform that was focused on two main areas: jobs and justice. Let me start perhaps with the second. We strongly believe that justice is a precondition to success for everything else, whether it's rule of law for businesses, whether it's meritocracy when you're trying to find a job, whether it's justice from the judicial institutions. We are strong believers in these principles as a precondition we have to meet in order to be successful, either for the businesses inside or for FDIs, foreign direct investment, who truly look for legal predictability and protection of their investment. We also believe that we can only be successful in our reforms in the area of education, health, trade, economy, and elsewhere if we are successful in our rule of law efforts. And the current institutions have been making record-paced reforms in these areas, which are truly bringing back the hope of not just the people of Kosovo, but also of our international partners, and may I say even private investors, to look at Kosovo as their next destination of investment. I'm very lucky to be representing the youngest population in Europe also in terms of age. So our country is 13 years old, younger than every one of you here in the room, but our people are also very young. Over 70% of the people of Kosovo are under the age of 35, which means that this is our biggest human potential. So the next thing that we're doing is entirely changing that mindset of governing where, you know, in the past, around 80% of our budget would be spent in highways, infrastructure, and wages. And now we want to turn it to investing it in human capital. Because, look, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have to look at countries that really had problems with poverty and unemployment. And how did they solve it? one of the key issues here is investing in your human capital. And this is, of course, education to begin with, health, creating new jobs, especially for youth. And in my country, also for women, we have a very high inactivity rate among women. And this is a particular focus of mine as President of the Republic, but also of the government and all of the institutions of Kosovo. So investing in human capital, we believe, will pave the way for sustainable and long-term economic development. You see, this is domestic. However, Kosovo, as a country that arose after becoming a war-torn society, obviously, but with the large help of the international community, primarily the United States, is a country that has had unique challenges in foreign policy as well, which I look forward to discussing during our conversation. So we're not a member of the United Nations yet. We are a member of many UN special agencies. We are not a member of the European Union nor NATO, but these are the top two priorities of our foreign policy, which is very much linked to domestic policy, because reforms to become a member of the EU are very much related to, rule of law, education, economy, and so on and so forth. And lastly, it's not like, it is easy for us like it was with other members of the UN. They would directly become members of the UN, and they didn't have to seek individual recognitions on a bilateral basis. For us, it's different. We have to meet every country, some to meet many times for many years, until we convince them to recognize our sovereignty and independence. But one thing that made things much easier for us, actually two things. The first was the great support we have received from the United States and other European partners, and perhaps even beyond Europe, during this process of strengthening our statehood and state-building process. And the second is the fact that the International Court of Justice decided, through an advisory opinion back in 2008, a process in which I had the luck to represent the country alongside a team, that Kosovo's independence did not violate international law. And this has removed quite a lot of doubt from many countries who had questions and concerns in the past. The struggle is still continuing. We're still working hard to strengthen our statehood, to fight for more recognitions and for more memberships. Because becoming a member of an international organization, ultimately, it's not about just having a seat at the table. Ultimately, the end beneficiary are the people of your country. Whether you're a member of Interpol, through which you fight cross-border crime, or a member of the Council of Europe, through which your citizens can get access to the European Court of Human Rights, therefore you increase the level of protection of human rights, or a member of the WHO, of course, an organization that especially is relevant nowadays. All of these ultimately change the lives of our people for the better, which is why I'm so focused on this particular issue as well, because it's not just about being a stronger state, it's about really making the lives of your citizens easier. So everything we have nowadays in Kosovo, whether it's the right to education or the right to vote, is deeply cherished because of everything that I've mentioned so far. And this is among many reasons why I love talking to higher education institutions and share our experience, because you guys sitting over here and all of you listening online will be the leaders of tomorrow, whether you are in the United States and will be diplomats or presidents of the United States or coming from other countries. I'm sure that our paths will cross again, whether I will be meeting you as the next president of a country to ask you to recognize our independence, or will be meeting you to ask for your support, to allow our country to have a voice, to speak up for the rights of our people. I look forward for these paths to cross, and I look forward to this conversation, obviously. But perhaps to close with this, to understand where we are today, we have to understand where we come from as a country. So I look forward to sharing Kosovo's story with you today, also during our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. President Osmani, it is indeed a great pleasure and a privilege to moderate this conversation with you. Again, my name is Alex Cooley, and I head the Harriman Institute here at Columbia University. I'm particularly struck by the moment that we're in. where there's a lot of talk about the retreat of the West, the rise of emerging powers, Russia, China, the possibility that democracy now is very much on the back foot as opposed to the front foot. And given Kosovo's partnerships with the European Union, its eventual membership perspective, the close relationship with the United States, the privileging of democracy, as you mentioned in your comments, how do you view this moment, both as a head of state and also as a distinguished scholar of international law? Is there a set of policies and measures we can take up to halt back the tide of this democratic recession? Is this a matter of staying true to our values? How do you see the world and the challenges that we're confronting at this moment?
I'm so glad you brought this up. I think looking back at the history of the Western Balkans and the destruction that the wars brought there, every one of us needs to learn a great lesson of what happens when there is a recession on democracy. What happens if there is an appeasement towards autocrats or war criminals? What happens if we forget that we can only be successful if we truly work on our shared values? So for Kosovo, there has never been any doubt that the reason why we want to join the European Union, it's not just economic. For many countries, it may be economy. For us, it's because the union as such is based on the values that we share, the values for which we fought since medieval times. And for that reason, the value of our democracy, the value of freedoms, whether it's freedom of speech, freedom of media, or other kinds of civil rights and liberties, are at the foundation of the creation of our state. And no matter the fact that we're a very small country, we try to speak up about the importance of fighting for these values, about the importance of not allowing any country to get a shortcut. But they have to meet the values of rule of law, democracy, and other freedoms before, let's say, they join the European Union, or before they get the chance to be treated as an important actor in decision-making internationally. And this takes me to the influence of Russia and China, and I'll stop perhaps a little bit more with respect to Russia. Our country, not perhaps specifically, because we're one of the few countries in the region that has always rejected Russian influence. Even during the time of the pandemic, we're the only country in the region that rejected Russian and Chinese vaccines. We've only accepted vaccines that were approved by the FDA or EMA, the European organization that deals with vaccines. But also economically and in other aspects, we have not allowed for that influence to come forward. However, we're having a big problem in terms of security threats towards our region. And this is primarily happening because of the malign influence from Russia using Serbia as the trampoline for their influence in the region. Now, Serbia has unfortunately increased, not decreased, their military, economic and political cooperation with Russia and China in the past couple of years. And through that, they are trying to destabilize the entire Western Balkans, whether it is by destabilizing North Kosovo or parts of Bosnia through Republika Srpska, or Montenegro, which is a case that we recently have where Serbia, with the influence of Russia, is meddling into the internal affairs of Montenegro. All of this has led to quite a lot of hate speech and the kind of hegemonic approach that we have only seen during the 90s, which is why not just myself as the president of Kosovo, but the president of other countries in the region are also very concerned with this ingrowing Russian influence, which through Serbia is destabilizing the entire region. And the second thing is the Russian model of annexation of territories, which Serbia is striving to use in the context of the Western Balkans, whether through Republika Srpska, North Kosovo, or other regions in our part of the world in southeastern Europe. So this is deeply concerning, and we're trying to send a message, a unified message with other leaders of the region, to not just here in the United States, but also members of the European Union, to act before it becomes too late. because, you know, in the 90s, we saw the pattern of how it all went, the language that Slobodan Milosevic used, the alliances that he was forming with Russia and elsewhere, the actions that he was undertaking. And unfortunately, the current regime in Serbia is using, well, it has the same aims, but simply a different strategy. But the language that is used with the daily threats, security threats against our countries is making everyone quite concerned. And in this case, it wouldn't be just, you know, helping out stability in the region. It would be preserving the values of democracy for which we have all sacrificed and worked for so hard. And we've built in the past 2 or 3 decades, both in Kosovo, in Bosnia, Montenegro, and elsewhere. We have built multi-ethnic societies based on the values of democracy, based on the most advanced constitutions, perhaps not just in Europe, but also elsewhere in the world. The amount of human rights and minority community rights that we've offered for those that do not belong to the majority community, you cannot find anywhere else in Europe. So this is a values-based system which is endangered by the kind of malign influence that we see from Russia and China nowadays. China mostly through economy, obviously. However, we see that it's still threatening the stability of our region.
Yeah. Well, actually, I want to ask you a follow-up question regarding your relations with Serbia. So earlier this week, following the expiration of an interim deal about the freedom of movement between Serbia and Kosovo, Kosovo began forcing cars with Serbian registered license plates to remove the plates and put on temporary Kosovo plates. Now, this reflects this impetus to make all relations between Kosovo and Serbia reciprocal. This is something that previous governments have shied away from. So can you talk to us a little bit about, is this indeed a new policy, this reciprocity, and how does that square with the perspective of the international community, the EU, the US, that wants to avoid such types of tit-for-tat kinds of measures?
Look, reciprocity in trade or in other measures is one of the healthiest principles of international law and international relations, especially if you waited for 10 years for the other party to remove the tariffs, the barriers, the blockage, and the problems caused for any citizen going from Kosovo to Serbia. Even when they had Serb citizenship, they had the same kind of problems. So let me perhaps just mention the background a little bit. In 2011, an agreement was signed between Kosovo and Serbia in Brussels under the auspices of the European Union so that the countries would allow for freedom of movement. In 2016, another agreement, because that one expired, a new agreement was signed, and it had a 5-year lifespan until the 16th of September of this year, according to which both parties would simply put stickers, little stickers, on the windows of those who come in and go, which was really easy because it really wouldn't make people remove the registration plates, put another one, remove your ID card, get a piece of paper. What Serbia was doing was the exact of what we signed in Brussels. So instead of doing the stickers agreements, for example, if I would go to Serbia, well, as president, I'm not sure if they would allow me, but when I used to go, because my husband comes from Preševo, which is in South Serbia, in the Preševo Valley, when we would visit our family, we would have to remove the registration plate, and then the Serb police would bring another one in Cyrillic language, which says proba, which means probation or something, I'm not sure. And then you would have when you would give your ID, they would issue like a new piece of paper. So practically they wanted to stripe you off your identity by just entering their country. And you had to pay, obviously, as well to enter it. So this was very difficult, also even technically. It made it really difficult. The lines were very long. It made it difficult for economy to flourish. For example, according to international organizations, it takes a truck from Kosovo to get to Serbia 33 times longer than a truck to come from Serbia to Kosovo, so vice versa. So for 10 years, we've been trying to convince Serbia, and so has the European Union, to remove this barrier for the freedom of goods and people. They didn't want to. So when this agreement expired, obviously, we tried to convince them again to have another agreement on these little stickers or to remove these all of these obstacles for the registration plates. They didn't want to. So since the agreement has expired, the only measure that Kosovo was in the place to put was reciprocal measures. So I wouldn't call it tit for tat. You know, what we've been saying to the international community is this. These temporary registration plates are either good for both parties or bad for both parties. They cannot be a bad action if Kosovo does it, but a good action if Serbia has been doing it for 10 years and no one has been raising its voice against it. So obviously we will immediately remove these measures the moment Serbia does so. But when we tried that, they said, why should we? We're not equals. Well, our answer is we are, and we will forever be equals. Equality is what we strive in this relation. And of course, this is a fundamental principle if we want a success in the dialogue. We're working really closely with our international partners to find a solution to this, I want to reassure you. And our delegation has said that they're ready to go to Brussels anytime if invited to discuss this particular issue. But even when the European Union intermediary proposed the solution about 2 or 3 days ago, a medium solution for both parties, Kosovo accepted it. Although we were not happy with it, it was something in the middle of the road. We were absolutely not happy, but for the sake of the process and for the sake of de-escalating the situation, we said yes. Serbia said no. So I think it's about time now to go to the party that has been destabilizing, the party that has been escalating, and have the international community to speak to Serbia in a language that they understand and not treating them as the spoiled child of Europe while they have not been implementing the agreements that they have themselves have signed within the European Union-led dialogue.
Yeah. So you mentioned the European Union. Let's stick there. Now, Kosovo is one of the very few countries in Europe that does not have visa-free travel to the EU. And the EU has repeatedly promised visa liberalization to Kosovo in return for a variety of reform and demonstrated progress. Do you have, and does your government have a new strategy for how to deal with the EU and securing visa liberalization? How important is this freedom of mobility to your country's future?
Is absolutely important because the citizens of Kosovo, the youngest in the continent, are the only ones kind of living in a ghetto. So it's not like we're producing any illegal immigration. We're simply not the country, even in the top 40 or 50, producing illegal immigrants. Quite the opposite. Our youth wants to go to Europe to study and come back to their country, to visit as a tourist and come back, to go visit a museum and come back, to participate in a conference or a round table, or perhaps go and listen to a speech or a talk like this and come back with more knowledge, with more experience, with new horizons that can open after you do get that experience, and always come back and contribute to their country. You rightly pointed out that the EU promised many times already that we will be getting visa liberalization in exchange of reforms. Those reforms turned into 95 benchmarks, which is called the Visa Liberalization Roadmap, drafted by the European Union, have all been implemented and fulfilled many years ago. It's been more than 3.5 years that the European Commission, which is the body that gives the recommendation and tells the other member states whether we have fulfilled these benchmarks or not, they've said many times that we have fulfilled these benchmarks, that they have issued a positive recommendation to the member states in favor of visa liberalization for Kosovo. After that, the European Parliament voted twice, overwhelmingly with 2/3 majority, in favor of visa liberalization for Kosovo. Now, to be honest, it's up to the political domestic considerations of each and every country. But look, this process should have never been about politics. It's very technical. It has been technical for every one country that is now benefiting from visa liberalization, from Venezuela to countries in our region. They all have visa-free travel for the European Union, and not the tiny Kosovo with 1.8 million. Who are, next door to every European Union member state. So it's obviously a process that is absolutely unfair. We have delivered. Now it's up to the European Union to deliver. The strategy is this. We're working individually and very intensively with those member states that still have concerns. There are 2 or 3, not more than that. And I think we're being successful. But we need to be patient. We need to be patient. At the same time, We're offering them this. We're saying, look, we have fulfilled all of the criteria. Nevertheless, if you have any question or concern, how about you send your teams to Kosovo? Whether it's about rule of law, foreign affairs, economy, education, anything. Send your team so that expert teams can sit down and see for themselves in the ground whether any of these concerns are actually reasonable or simply something that they've heard from others. But another unfair thing that happens in our region quite often is that, they're unhappy with some other country and then they punish you for the unhappiness that they have with that other country. But this is truly not the process with how the process is built within the EU. The way how it's built is technical benchmarks. You tick, we tick. That has not happened in the case of Kosovo, which is why, once again, to call on the European Union to deliver, to keep their promise. Otherwise, it's also an issue of their credibility in our region, not just an issue of visa liberalization for the people of Kosovo, which is, I strongly believe, also a human rights issue, a freedom of movement issue.
Well, if we could also turn our attention now to another important partner, perhaps the most important partner and ally, the United States. Of course, this has been a tumultuous month in U.S. foreign policy. The withdrawal from Afghanistan caught many by surprise, as did the speed of the collapse of the government in Kabul. And we heard from certain allies their concerns about what does this mean for U.S. credibility in its alliances? Is there a fear of abandonment of commitments that have been made? How do you view your relations with the U.S. and particularly this issue of credibility? Is Afghanistan in the way we left of concern to you? What are the similarities and differences in these situations as far as you're concerned?
Well, perhaps to start saying this, the difference is quite big in terms of the political comparison of what happened in Afghanistan and what happened in Kosovo. We were victims of a genocidal regime which left Kosovo after the NATO humanitarian bombing. And our process of state building has been, every step of the way, fully coordinated with the United States and with other European nations around the world. Around the continent. Now, given this, and given the fact that there are still NATO forces, including US forces, situated in Kosovo, and given the fact that we've received reassurances, both from the United States as well as other NATO members, that they see Kosovo as an important place for the security of the entire region and the entire European continent, we have no reason to believe that we would be abandoned. Because it's not just a question of Kosovo security, it's a question of security in the entire European continent. Second, what is in common? I think human suffering is in common. Human suffering that we see in Afghanistan and what we had to go through in Kosovo obviously brings quite a lot of painful memories to all of us, which is why we're the first nation in the world to give the green light to receive Afghan citizens in Kosovo, especially the Afghan US allies who went through the special visa immigrant applications in the P2 category. We've discussed and agreed with the President Biden administration back in July that we will be receiving within the capacities that our small country offers. But I think, although small, we have shown our big heart, because I think it's so important in a time of need that you lend a helping hand. And for us, this process has been important for twofold reasons. One, because we could, 22 years after the democratic world did not turn their backs on us, but saved our lives, opened their doors. I'm a former refugee myself, and I know, alongside over 1 million Kosovars, what it means to have that open door and to have safe haven to survive. So now, 22 years after, we can give back. We can help the international community as a small country, but perhaps sometimes with a bigger impact than we are big as a country, to show that we can do something to help peace and security in the world. And secondly, it has been for us a moral obligation. It was very personal. What we saw, people leaving, and just the scenes of taking a little kid over the fences to save your life, it's the exact scenes you could see in Kosovo. So for us, it brought back every single memory that we had to go through. And for that reason, we couldn't close the doors. We opened the doors to save lives, to be there for these people who needed us. And obviously now, they're going through the application process for their permanent homes, whether is in the United States and elsewhere. And we've been working very closely with the Biden administration to make sure that this process goes as smooth as possible, as well as with NATO allies. Once again, Kosovo has shown NATO who its true friends are. So I do hope now that we're going to get the support of NATO members to join that organization, because in times like these, we are all tested whether we truly are contributing to peace and democracy around the world.
No. If I may switch gears before our student questions, you mentioned in an interview, Kosovo is not only ready for a female president, but voted for one. And the role of women is increasing in your country in unprecedented ways. When the election results were announced, we saw that nearly 40% of the new seats in parliament had been won by women. Why this support for female candidates in leadership right now? Is there something about the moment? Is there something generationally? How do you view this?
I think it's both, but I have to stress that it's a result of generations and generations of women before me having worked for this moment to arrive. So it's not like it's just the result of my work, having been involved in politics for the past 20 years or so, or the work of my colleagues, women politicians in the parliament, in the government, and elsewhere. But I think, what we noticed in Kosovo is that the society was emancipating quicker than political parties. The political parties, at least many, were not that ready for strong female leadership within the party. But the people were, especially the women of our society were. Now, we had a joint list with Prime Minister Kurti, and over 62% of our voters were women. We had quite a voter turnout and support from our diaspora as well, many of whom live here in the United States, but also quite a lot in other countries in Europe. And the third category that I would say that really made change possible in our country were the youth. The youth really wanted this big change after 2 decades of obvious progress, but it was not fast enough, especially in terms of economy, rule of law, and many other areas. So they needed a new generation of politicians, many of which educated in the United States and Europe, and who went back to contribute to their country with much more energy, I would say. So it's quite a re-energizing process of our politics, if I may say so. Policies and politicians who keep their word to the people. I think the fact that many of us, although being quite long in politics, have shown every step of the way that ethics do matter. Keeping your word and keeping your promise do matter in politics as well. In fact, especially in politics, has made the difference and made us the generation of politicians with the highest popular support in the history of Kosovo. But I think as women in politics, whether myself as president or my fellow colleagues in the parliament and the government, we can only be content and fulfilled if the seats that we have today, if the jobs that we have today are used for the benefit of removing the problems that women face every day in the society, whether it's about finding new jobs or no equal pay, or domestic violence, or economic empowerment, or access to justice. Only then we shall feel fulfilled and good about the jobs that we have, about the positions that we have in politics, if women in every area of our society are also succeeding and also removing the barriers and the stones that we all had to go through throughout the way.
Thank you. So let's launch into the hybrid part of our session and take some student questions. So we're going to take some questions over Zoom. What I would ask each of you to do is state your name so President Osmani knows who is asking the question, as well as your Columbia school or program that you are part of. So yes, please, first question.
Hello, my name is Olivia Sealer, and I am a student at Columbia College at Columbia University. And I was wondering if in the Balkan region, would it be better to have a nationalistic model of society where people of certain religions and nationalities cluster together, or a multi-ethnic and pluralistic model like in the United States? And then also, what would you comment on the current policies of Poland and Czechoslovakia?
I'm absolutely in favor of a multi-ethnic society. I think the notion of nation states where borders are redrawn along ethnic lines is a logic that belongs to the 19th century. And if you want to see the results of such policies, just look at what happened during the 90s in the Western Balkans. It was exactly these nationalistic hegemonic policies where just because you belong to different ethnicities, the regime thought that they had the right to kill you. These regimes, these kind of mindsets have brought to bloodshed, have brought to destruction and quite a lot of human suffering. So I absolutely think that these are not helpful, to be frank, even dangerous, at least in our part of the world, in Southeastern Europe. Obviously, every part of the world has a different history, has a different background, a different context. So the word nationalistic can mean different things to different people. But in our part of the world, of course, multi-ethnicity, living together, not segregating, not differentiating others just because they belong to a different ethnicity is what has brought more democracy and more stability. So we're striving to keep our multi-ethnic societies not just alive, but also thriving. When it comes to the other countries, obviously, I always respect the decision of the people of either Poland or other countries to make their decisions on who their government is. Of course, when it comes to Kosovo, our aim is to strengthen the bilateral relations with all of these countries. We might have differences on how we see the internal developments within the respective countries, but that should not stop us from enhancing bilateral relations, because I always think of relations from country to country in this way. It should never be about politicians. It should be about the people. Politicians come and go. The people of Kosovo and the people of Poland, let's say, they deeply respect each other. We have received so much support from those people, from that country, even from the Polish army. 1999, they were situated in my city, in Mitrovica. So we are deeply respectful for all of the people. So whether it's Vjosa Osmani as president today or someone else tomorrow, I really call upon these countries to support my people, not myself as a politician. My political career should not matter, because we come and go, we change. It is the people and what they represent, the values that they represent, what should matter in creating these connections between our two countries.
Perfect. Let's take the next question, I believe on my list. Alex.
Përshëndetje, Presidente Osmani. My name is Alex Chen. I'm a second-year master's student in the Harriman Institute for Russian, Eurasian, and Eastern European Studies here. First, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming to speak with us. And before coming to Harriman, I had worked in Pristina with UNDP on access to justice and rule of law. So your presentation and also just the empathy with which you speak about these issues is incredibly meaningful to hear. So building on Dr. Cooley's question, I'm particularly wondering how your background in rule of law and also work in women's empowerment will play into your domestic and foreign policy. So I'm curious as to how your previous work on gender equality and access to justice might factor into the upcoming talks between Pristina and Belgrade, and also, I guess, how an emphasis on minority rights might factor into discussions, or how minority rights might factor into upcoming policies for labor market or in the justice sector and rule of law. And thank you so much. Faleminderit.
Thank you. Faleminderit. Your Albanian is excellent. I really have great respect for all of the women and men that have worked in Kosovo throughout so many years through the UN, UNDP, and so many international organizations, USAID and so on and so forth. They've contributed immensely to the reforms in our country and in our system. I think my background in rule of law, and may I be even more specific, the time that I've spent in the United States, in a US law school, has deeply impacted me, not just as a professional, but also as a human being on how I want to resolve problems that we are facing. And in this sense, of course, in particular, when it comes to gender equality, rights of all communities living in Kosovo, access to justice, including justice for all of the victims of the wars in Kosovo, are issues that are very dear to my heart, and they're at the top of my agenda. They're part of my discussions with every single delegation, no matter where they come from. And of course, in this sense, the consultations and the coordination that we have on a weekly basis with the government on how these issues should play into the dialogue with Serbia, of course, they matter a lot. I would say for probably the first time in quite a while, we have a government, a president, and a parliament that coordinate on every single policy. We agree, I would say, the vast majority of times. Obviously, there are times when we might have different approaches, but we coordinate before actions that we undertake. And in this sense, my background, of course, comes into play in the decision-making, whether when it comes to the domestic legislation that we pass. For example, we do what we call gender budgeting for every piece of legislation. We'll look at how that would impact, whether it's the law on recycling or energy or the law on budget and everything. We make sure that we look at these pieces of legislation from a gender perspective as well, and then from a youth perspective as well, from the perspective of minority communities. So all these really come into play in every decision that we make, whether locally or when we talk with our international interlocutors. Obviously, when you sit down with an international organization and you're trying to convince them either for a loan or for an international agreement or for a donation, this comes to play a lot. It really matters when you speak also in professional terms, not just, as a politician, in professional terms. You know how to argue, you know how to be compelling and convince them to either help you build a hospital in Kosovo or donate for a youth project or give a loan for another women empowerment project. These really come into play a lot and have been helpful, at least in my career.
Thank you. Let's move to another question. Please.
Hello, President Vjosa Osmani. My name is Krista Kalai, and I'm a student at Columbia School of General Studies. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. As an Albanian myself, I'm quite familiar with the history of Kosovo and also the contributions that you have made for the Republic of Kosovo. And I'm curious to know what encounters or experiences earlier in your life shaped your vision for Kosovo as president today.
Thank you. That's a question that would require quite a long answer. I tried to mention a couple of these things a little earlier, but perhaps I would go back to what I said at the beginning. My time as a young student in a country where our right to education was denied, and then building a system where education was perseverance. You didn't go to school just to study. You went to school to save your nation, to survive, has shaped me for life on everything that I want to do and everything that we want to achieve. Later on, as it's obvious for every citizen of Kosovo that has gone through the war, my experience during the war, losing so many people that we loved, seeing with our own eyes people that we love being killed, and then, after the war, trying to find people that are still missing from the war. All of these make you understand the value of life, the value of freedom, and the value of the country, the independent and sovereign country that we have today. And every single time that an important decision is in front of you, you have to think how many of your compatriots that have been killed during the war could have been in this seat today. So many of my schoolmates who were killed as teenagers could have been in this seat today. So beyond my obligation as a politician, I always think that before that, it is my obligation as a human being to remember every soul lost, every life lost, and to also do it for them, Because only then you truly understand the true weight and the true responsibility of your job. For every little kid who was killed and lost his or her life, even before they turned 1, even before they knew their own name, and for every other young person who could have been, a winner of the past elections and celebrate together with us and now become an important part of Kosovo's young history, we have to do it for them as well. And obviously, it is something that every day makes us understand the value of freedom, but at the same time, it makes us understand how important it is for all those who survived, for the young generations in Kosovo, to build a path forward, to look forward, to have a much brighter future than what we had to go through, not to go through the obstacles, not to have the same kind of instability, to feel safe to begin with, to feel safe, which is the most basic thing, to feel safe, but also to feel that they can prosper in their own country and not to look at their perspective outside of the country. So I'm not sure if I'm being able to explain well, because the experience that we had to go through are immense, and they've been tragic for a while, but then at the same time, to be able for myself to be part of so many historic processes, from, working on preparing the Declaration of Independence, to working on drafting the constitutions, to working as a very young woman, a young lawyer, working to convince countries to recognize Kosovo right after independence, to defending our country's case in front of the International Court of Justice, to the work that I do today. It's the privilege of a lifetime to represent what I think is the best nation in the world, the Albanians and all of the Kosovars living in Kosovo.
Thank you. Well, we're almost at time, but we have time for one more question. So let's go to the students one last time.
Hi, I'm Charles Bonkowski. I'm a student at Columbia College. I was wondering, you mentioned a lot about justice for the victims of the war, and I wanted to ask, what does that look like? What will it look like in Kosovo when, what will it look like to have that happen? Are some of the trials in The Hague or the Kosovo Specialist Chambers sort of a step forward on that? Thanks.
Thank you. Justice, I believe, is a precondition to peace and reconciliation anywhere in the world, but in particular in former Yugoslavia and in the countries that are now formed as independent. Unfortunately, Serbia is still in a state of denial. They denied the genocide in Srebrenica. They denied the crimes committed in Kosovo, both war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. They denied practically everything that they've committed, although many of their leadership were found guilty at the ICTY. But look what happened. After the ICTY, they go to Serbia and they get rewards from the president of Serbia or from their army. So they are rehabilitated instead of, delivering justice for the victims that the Milosevic regime has caused. So the wounds are still very deep. And in the case of Kosovo, there are very little cases where justice has been delivered. So most of those that were involved in crimes that are now fugitives, they don't live in Kosovo. I'm talking about the Serbs who used to be living in Kosovo. They left right in 1999. We believe most of them are in Serbia. Serbia is not, of course, making sure that there is free trial against them for the crimes that they have committed against civilians, which is why there is a denial of justice now for 22 years, whether it's for the innocent victims of massacres around Kosovo or for the women that were raped during the wars in Kosovo. There is a denial of justice. So the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia, which existed for a couple of years, has now been shut down. Some some of their top military and political leaders were tried, but not many. So we're still striving for justice, and we're trying to find a way, either in Kosovo or by forming new international, mechanisms, that these Serbs who committed the crimes in Kosovo would finally be facing justice as a precondition for us to move on. In terms with Serbia. However, when it comes to the specialist chambers that you have mentioned, they have been formed by the Kosovo Parliament with 2/3 of votes because of a report that had been drafted by a Council of Europe member, a senator, that was stigmatizing Kosovo as if Kosovo was the one committing crimes. Obviously, we do not accept moral equivalency between what a state apparatus has done, what Serbia as a country, as a state-sponsored regime committed in Kosovo against innocent civilians, and what some individuals might have committed after the war, which was not the country, not Kosovo, not chain of command, not the people of Kosovo supporting any of that happening. So there is a big difference between that, but since we have nothing to hide and we have always fully cooperated and supported international justice, we have established these specialist chambers so that they can judge that report of the Council of Europe. And we believe, of course, in international justice, and we also believe that there's nothing that can ever change history. Despite of these history revisionism efforts, there is only one truth that happened in front of the eyes of the entire world, and that is Serbia was the aggressor and we were the victims. Nothing can change that. There is clear evidence that has been confirmed by the ICTY and also by the ICJ that referred to these crimes against us, not just during the 1998-1999 war, but also during the apartheid-like system that existed since Milosevic took power.
Well, President Osmani, we are at the end of our time. On behalf of Columbia University and the World Leaders Forum, I want to thank you for coming to us, for visiting us, for sharing your experiences, your thoughtful answers and perspective on your country as well as the shape of the world. And we wish you the best of luck in your endeavors, and we hope you will visit us again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all for joining. Thank you.